What's up everyone, this is Danny from Plug and Play. Plug and Play is a new platform for After Effects users that provides a premium toolkit of all of our After Effects software and motion graphics assets. We're really trying to create just like a one-stop shop for the best motion graphics tools out there. And we're launching our brand new beta tool today called Curves. Curves is a comprehensive After Effects easing tool that allows you to do so many different types of easing right in one panel. Super fun, super easy to get started, so let's just dive right in. Great, so when you open up Curves for the first time, this is what it's going to look like. It's going to have a big bezier handle curve inside of the middle of the panel, and this should be very similar to the graph editor inside of After Effects. We're really just trying to make an extension to the graph editor, but include many more features and abilities to do different types of eases all in one panel. Super fun. Yeah, we have this awesome graph editor right here, and it's really easy to just start by applying easing to selected keyframes. So as you can see, I have these two selected keyframe sets in my timeline, and this is just a little box scaling up and rotating with no easing whatsoever on the keyframes right now. But let's go ahead. We're going to create a nice little easy ease here, hit apply, and just like that, we have a nice ease inside of our new scaling box. But let's move on to the next animation. We'll go ahead and shy that layer, turn this one on, and this is another animation with a box, but this time the box is going up in Y position here. So with the Curves tool, there's a bunch of different ways to affect the easing. But one of the ways that we can affect easing here is not only by dragging these handles around, but we can also go down to the bottom left of the panel here. And if we hover over these two numbers, we're going to reveal these two sliders that allow us to affect the position of our handles. So we can shoot this handle way up here in Y position, and then also go ahead and let's move this handle up a little bit, create a nice overshoot animation. Select our keyframes, hit apply, and just like that, we have a nice overshoot animation, all done right inside of the Curves panel. Great. So now let's go ahead and kind of go through some of the different UI components of Curves. Now at the top, I already mentioned that we have the easing mode, but we also have this distribution mode. Distribution mode is similar to easing, as in it provides the same type of bezier interface, but distribution mode is for distributing keyframes and layers across the timeline following this curve. And I'll show you all more about that here later on in the video. But if you have ever used Lazy before, it's the same type of tool, does the same thing, but now it's all built into one panel. Now, if we go over to the middle of the top of the panel, there is this preset bar that we can go ahead, enter into, search up whatever type of curve we're looking for, and there's a huge preset library that we ship the tool with. So you can go ahead, just click on one, it's going to load that up right into the bezier interface. And of course, if we want to save our own preset, we just go ahead, make our curve, and then let's go ahead and click this button, and it's going to allow us to create whatever curve we want. Curve. Great. Now to the right of that, we also have this button that allows us to enter inside of the settings panel. And there's going to be some different settings in here, probably more to come. So Curves is very much in a beta mode right now. This has only gone live like a couple hours ago, so there's going to be plenty of bugs. We try to fix as many as we can, but be prepared to find some. And if you do find some, please, please, please reach out to us. Let us know. We're trying to polish this tool as much as we can and make it a pleasure to use by motion graphics artists all around the world. So please let us know if there's any issues, anything that we can improve upon. We're always here to listen. Great, so let's go back to the easing mode. Now, as I mentioned before, we have these different modals for affecting the bezier handle position, but we also have the ability to enter into elastic or bounce mode. So let's go ahead and check out elastic mode. Now, elastic mode provides us an easy to use interface for creating all different types of elastic animations. And we provided a bunch of different sliders to dial in whatever type of elastic animation you want to create. So many different opportunities to create stuff here. It's wild. But yeah, let's go over to this other composition here. And as you can see, I have this ball scaling up from 0 all the way to 100, and it's also moving along the x-axis. So let's go ahead and just apply these default parameters here and check out what this curve looks like. So as you can see, we've got a pretty decent elastic animation going for us right off the bat. And we can really start now to dial into these different parameters here and affect the different types of elastic animation that we want to create. So as you can imagine, amplitude is going to affect how intense these different animations are, these different elastic overshoots are. Now, next to that, we also have duration, and duration is going to scale out the effect or also shrink this in. So if we want to have like a really tight, bouncy, like short, springy animation, we can scale this duration back. And let's go ahead and hit apply here. And let's see what this looks like. So as you can see, it's much springier, but if we go ahead and crank out this duration, then we're going to get a much longer type of elastic animation here. Really quick way to add some fun and exciting animations into your workflow. But now let's talk about this decay X. So I'm going to bring back duration here, and decay X is going to decay the amount of time that is in between every single bounce overshoot. So if we crank out the duration here a little bit, and then also crank out the decay X, and actually I'm going to bring this duration back, we can get a really springy animation at the beginning, and then towards the end it's going to kind of taper off and be slower. So let's go ahead and apply that. And as you can see, we have that really springy effect at the beginning, but let's go ahead and decay this X a little bit more, bring out this duration, and reapply here. And now you can see we get that really dramatic spring effect at the beginning, but towards the end it gets much slower, kind of dies off. Now we can do the opposite of that as well. Let's go ahead and scale this decay X back, increase the duration, and maybe not too much here. Maybe something like that right there. Cool. We'll hit apply. And now as you can see, we have a pretty nice overshoot to begin with, and then at the end of the animation, it gets much springier here. Cool. So we'll go ahead, reset these guys. Now let's check out decay Y. So decay Y is very similar to decay X in that it sequentially decays the amount of amplitude per bounce. So let's go ahead and we'll increase this, and as you can see, we're getting a much longer bounce animation, and if we dial this back, we see the animation ending much quicker. So we can go ahead, give this one a shot too, hit apply here, and as you can see, this one dies off much quicker. But if we shoot up this decay Y, reapply, this is going to last for much longer here. So many ways that we can play around with different elastic animations inside of After Effects with this tool. It's awesome. I've been using it for so many different projects, and I mean, it's so fun to really just be able to create whatever type of elastic animation your heart desires, all from these different parameters. It's wild. But one of the coolest parameters of this tool is actually the hang parameter. So hang allows us to apply this easing effect at the peaks and valleys of every single elastic overshoot. So by that I mean, let's scale this all the way back down. You can see that there's basically like no easing on these different points here. But if we scale up this hang, we get to see that there's some really dramatic easing going on. So let's go ahead. I'm going to increase this duration a little bit, and let's just apply this with that dramatic ease going on. And so you can see that it's very dramatic the way it goes back and forth from those different peaks and valleys. Really another way to just dial in the perfect elastic animation for what your heart desires. Great, so elastic is super fun, but let's move over to our next tool, which is going to be bounce. So move to another composition here, and in this composition, as you can see, have a bunch of balls falling down from the top of the composition to the bottom. And I know what you're thinking, let's go ahead and add some bounce animations. Cool. Well, Curves is a perfect tool to do that, and we provide a bunch of different parameters for affecting whatever type of bounce animation you want to create. Okay, so let's just go ahead and use the default values that are in the panel, hit apply, and now let's preview this animation. And as you can see, we've got a pretty nice bounce animation right off the bat. Now, just like we did with the elastic animation, let's go ahead and dive into these different parameters for bounce. So at the top left, you can see that we have this bounciness parameter. And as you can imagine, that's for affecting the bounciness of our bounce animations. So if we scale this back a little bit, let's go ahead, put it about there. We'll hit apply. And now this will be a much more of a dead bounce, if you will. There's not going to be as much bounces. It's going to end fairly quickly, but let's just give it a preview. So as you can see, this one dies much quicker, much more of a dead feeling to these balls as opposed to that crazy bounce that we had when we had the bounciness turned way up. Now, moving right along, we have the amplitude value. So this is used for affecting the amplitude of the bounces. So if we want something to be super bouncy, to shoot up like way above the typical bounce, we can go ahead and crank up this amplitude. Let's just do something like 142, hit apply. And as you can see, these balls are going to be bouncing much higher here. We'll go ahead, turn that back. And let's go over gravity. So gravity is going to be a way for us to scale out how long this bounce animation takes. And it's a good way to give some artificial sense of gravity into the scene. So if I scale this back to like 58, we'll undo our last bounce animation, hit apply. And as you can see, this is very quick, very snappy bounce effect. But if we want to really elongate this, we can crank up the gravity here, hit apply. And now this is going to be a much slower type of bounce animation. Great. So let's move on to the two decay parameters here. Very similar to the elastic mode. Decay Y is going to decay the sequential amplitude for every single bounce. And so as you can see, we're decaying and not decaying. And it's doing this effect where it's adding more bounces or increasing the amplitude of the bounces across the lifespan of the bounce animation. So a fun thing to do is to like set this pretty low. And then let's go ahead and hit apply here. And now that dies off pretty quickly in a different type of way. Now, decay X, just like the decay X in elastic, is going to affect the amount of time that each sequential bounce lasts for. So if we crank down this decay X, undo our last bounce, and now preview this, you can see that the time in between each bounce is decaying across the lifespan of this bounce animation. So really the best way to experiment all of these different parameters is just to get in here, start playing around with them, see what each parameter does, and get a feel for it. There's a lot of them right now because in this beta mode, we wanted to just provide you all with the most amount of flexibility possible, try out everything, see what you like, see what you don't, and then when it comes time to actually put this into more of a public position, we'll have something that's really dialed in where we have the exact parameters that are most useful for motion designers. Now, the last parameter inside of bounce is going to be this hang feature. And just like we had inside of elastic, this allows us to affect the easing of the different peaks along our bounce animation. So if you want something to feel like super animated, like cartoony, where it is taking a long time at the top of the peak and then very quickly shooting down, just like happens in the cartoons all the time, we can crank up this hang, hit apply, and now we have this very dramatic type of bounce animation. And we'll go ahead, increase the bounciness. And again, this just kind of takes some time to play around with. Maybe we'll go ahead and decrease this decay Y, crank up the gravity, turn down the bounciness a little bit. I don't know, just play around with it to your heart's content. There's so much different stuff that you can do with this and just create all these different crazy types of bounce animations. So much fun. You got to try it. All right, so enough about bounce. Let's go to our last tool here, and that's going to be the distribute mode. So distribution mode, just like in Lazy, if you all have ever played around with that tool before, it allows us to distribute keyframes and layers across a timeline using a Bezier curve. Great. So I have all of these layers selected here. I have a new curve set up inside of the curve editor, and let's just hit apply. Great. So right off the bat, we have all of these different, let's go ahead, change the layers there. We have all of these different layers offset in time following this Bezier curve. Now, we can also flip the curve. So if we didn't want the distribution to start from the bottom, maybe we wanted it to start from the top, we can go ahead, hit apply here, and now we have a flipped distribution going on. Also, if we want to affect the amount of frames that are being distributed over, we can go ahead and crank this up. And now instead of 20 frames, it's going to be a 30 frame distribution, and we have this distribution for us. Now, like real quick, this is so much fun to play around with the other tools. So when you're in distribution mode, if you want to get access to the elastic and bounce parameters, you need to go back to the easing mode, come down here, and then we'll go back to bounce. Let's just do a quick bounce animation here. Hit apply to this. Great. And then let's go back to distribution mode. We'll go ahead, select all of these different keyframes. We have our curve set up. Let's hit apply, 20 frames. Okay. And just like that, we have all of these different balls coming on at different times and then all bouncing with that bounce animation that we created using the tool. All of this animation was done using curves, super quick to do. It's awesome, guys. You got to give it a go. Okay, enough boasting. Yeah, so distribution mode, super fun. Flip, you have the ability to add more frames. You can also affect the bezier handles here as well. And the last portion of this tool is going to be this mode called Synergy. And Synergy is still very, very beta. It's probably more of an alpha feature right now. But let's go ahead and enable Synergy. And what Synergy allows you to do is to combine the two different concepts here of easing and distribution mode. So I'll go ahead and click into this box, and we're going to load up a new curve. I'm going to do, let's do expo in. And then for the ease in, let's do an expo out. Great. And this only is going to work on selected keyframes. So you need to have keyframes selected in order to do this. So we're in distribution mode. We have the Synergy model enabled, and we have two different curves loaded up. Let's go ahead and hit apply. So two things just happened. One, we distributed the keyframes along the timeline following our Bezier curve. And I know that the distribution here is flipped from what the curve is. We're fixing it, don't worry. But the second thing that happened is that we applied easing to all of these different keyframes. So if we look at the first keyframe set in this distribution, you can see that we have that expo in curve applied to this keyframe's easing. And if we go to the last keyframe in this distribution, we have the expo out curve applied to this keyframe's easing. And all of the keyframes in the middle have an interpolation between those two different curves that we set inside of that modal. So it's just a really crazy way to do distributions and easing of your keyframes in the same fluid motion, and provides you a lot of opportunity to do different crazy types of like sequentially changing eases over the course of a distribution. So much cool stuff. Like I said, this is still very much in alpha mode, so please don't ridicule too much, but definitely test it out. Please let us know any bugs that you find regarding that feature and all the other features in general. Like I said, we're just trying to get this to be a very polished product that's a pleasure to use by motion designers everywhere. I know that I've found a lot of usage just using it in personal projects and client projects so far, but it's super fun. Really hope you guys enjoy it, and please give us as much feedback as possible. That's all we're looking for right now. Just want to make a really premium toolkit and experience for motion designers everywhere. So thank you all so much for your help. We really appreciate it. Please let me know. Please reach out if you have anything to share. We're always happy to talk and chat. And so, yeah, thank you all so much. I'll catch you on my next one. This has been Danny from Plug and Play.